think the first is you need to work, depending upon how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hard up we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night, 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, like every waking hour. That's the thing I would say particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company. The other thing I'd say is that if you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating. And they're able to attract great people to build a company. But the ability to attract and motivate great people is critical to the success of a company, because a company is it's a group of people that are assembled to create a product or service. That's the purpose of a company. People sometimes forget this elementary truth, and so if you're able to get great people to join the company and work together towards a common goal, and you sort of have a relentless sense of perfection about that goal, then you will end up with a great product. And if you have a great product, lots of people will buy it, and then the company will be successful. Yeah. So really, it's pretty straightforward, really. I mean, yeah, that's the reason for it. I wouldn't say I'm fearless. In fact, I think I feel fear quite strongly. But if what we're doing is what I'm doing I think is important enough, then I just override the fear. Mm-hmm. So, but it's not as though I don't feel. I feel it like more strongly than I would like.
And in which areas would you never go full risk if you still are fearful?
Well, it really depends on the stakes. If the stakes are high, if it's really important, then I will overcome the fear and just do it anyway. Mm-hmm. But essentially, I just drive overrides fear, but I feel the fear. It's kind of annoying. I wish I didn't. Okay. I wish I felt it less. Uh-huh. So, yeah.
How much of your success do you attribute to having really audacious goals, or versus just not being focused on the short term, money coming in, or investors?
Unfortunately, one does have to be focused on the short term and money coming in when creating a company, because otherwise the company will die. So I think that a lot of times people think like creating a company is going to be fun. I would say it's not. It's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you have like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problem in the company, the most pernicious and painful problem. So I wouldn't say I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it, and have a fairly high pain threshold. And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And there's some truth to that. The staring into the abyss part is that you're going to be constantly facing the extermination of the company. Because most startups fail. It's like 90%, arguably 99% of startups fail. So, that's the staring into the abyss part. You're constantly saying, okay, if I don't get this right, the company will die. It can be quite stressful. And then the eating glass part is you've got to do the problems. You've got to work on the problems that the company needs you to work on, not the problems you want to work on. And so that's you end up working on problems that you'd really wish you weren't working on. And so that's the eating glass part. And that goes on for a long time.
So how do you keep your focus on the big picture when you're constantly faced with, we could be out of business in a month?
Well, it's just a very small percentage of mental energy is on the big picture. Like you know where you're generally heading for, and the actual path is going to be some sort of zigzaggy thing in that direction. You try not to deviate too far from the path that you want to be on, but you're going to have to do that to some degree. But I don't want to diminish the. I mean, I think the profit motive is a good one if the rules of an industry are properly set up. So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with profit. In fact, profit just means that people are paying you more for whatever you're doing than you're spending to create it. That's a good thing. and if that's not the case, then you'll be out of business, and rightfully so. Because you're not adding enough value. Now, there are cases, of course, where people will do bad things in order to achieve profit, but that's actually quite unusual. I mean, because usually the rules are set up mostly correctly, like not completely, but mostly correctly.
Then I'd say focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. So, for example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. I think that's the way to go. So for any given company, just keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product? Is to sort of don't just follow the trend. So you may have heard me say that it's good to think in terms of the physics approach of first principles, which is, rather than reasoning by analogy, you boil things down to the most fundamental truths you can imagine, and you reason up from there. And this is a good way to figure out if something really makes sense, or if it's just what everybody else is doing. It's hard to think that way. You can't think that way about everything. It takes a lot of effort. But if you're trying to do something new, it's the best way to think. And that framework was developed by physicists to figure out counterintuitive things like quantum mechanics. So it's really a powerful method. Anyway, so that's, and then I think that the final thing I would encourage you to do is, now is the time to take risk. You don't have, you don't have kids. Your obligation. Well, sorry, probably don't have kids. But as you get older, your obligations increase. So and once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it. Thank you.
You found it was the most risky at the start?
Well, probably SpaceX. I thought it had the lowest chance of success. I mean, I thought both Tesla and SpaceX would fail at the beginning. You know?
You saw it?
Yeah,
So-
sure.
Really?
Of course.
But nevertheless, you put all your money in that, in both.
I expected to lose it. Well, technically, what I thought was, well, I'll take half the money from PayPal, and if I lose half of it, that's okay. But then, of course, the companies encounter difficulties, and then I have a choice of either let the company die or put, you know, all the money into the companies. And so I really didn't want the companies to die, so I put all the money in the companies.
Yeah.
And then I had to borrow money from friends to pay living expenses.
Yes. What was your best idea ever?
My best idea ever?
Yeah.
This is tricky. I suppose coming to North America was my best idea,
Okay.
because I think these things would not have been accomplished, you know, almost anywhere else. It's really hard to start a company, but you know, and particularly California, Silicon Valley is very conducive to startup companies, you know, whenever I'd read books in South Africa, it would seem like the cutting edge of technology was in Silicon Valley, and so that's when I wanted to come and I wanted to move to this mythical place.
Okay.